If gold were in fact an efficient currency, how come no successful country on earth has used it as a currency?
What the fuck? This is an unbelievably retarded question for you to ask.
Bitcoin Uncensored. Finance.
But with the Bitcoin, baby.
What's up, party people? This is Chris DeRose, and with me is Saifedean Ammous, a guy you may or may not know, but a guy who's going to talk to us today about gold. I think it's stupid. He thinks it's awesome. Saifedean, let's get started. What do you like about gold?
Well, just to begin with, it's not the bling. Let's just make that clear. I don't really wear gold, and it's not about it being pretty to look at, although that probably helps. But for me, the issue with gold is that it is, or at least it was, depends on who you ask, the best form of sound money that humanity had ever had. So fundamentally, it's not an attachment to gold. It's just about wanting the free market to decide what is money. So you know free markets. You understand the concept behind free markets. I assume.
No, I have absolutely no idea what a free market is. Why don't you tell us? What's a free market? Truly, I don't.
Okay, so essentially, with any sort of economic decision, whether it is the production of potatoes or the allocation of capital in an economy, the decision can either be taken by the people involved in the production of the potato and the buying of the potato and the selling of the potato, or it can be imposed by a third party, somebody who comes to you and me. Let's say you're selling me potatoes and they say, no, you shouldn't be selling them potato for that price, you should do it for this price, or you're not allowed to do it unless you get a license from that guy or whatever. So anytime...
But there's no such thing as that. That's like a libertarian fantasy. Where in the world do we find model of a free market?
Well, all over the world, everywhere you go, there's always a free market.
Best thinking. What's the best example of a free market today?
Just today I hired a plumber and I paid him money, and he came and I agreed with him on a price and I paid him money. That's a free market right there.
No, but he needed a license. He probably needed insurance. He certainly needed incorporation.
Nope.
And okay, fine. Then if you did it with cash money only,
yep,
then the reason why that he's able to provide the efficiency that he is because there are others who have the appropriate licenses who have to charge more. So in his case, because he's not following the rules, he has a reduction on the price maybe. And added risk, I might add, because if there's additional licenses that are needed in order for permitting down the line, that'll cost you money. But the entirety for your reason to use him even might have been the fact that the regulations existed, which made him cheaper. Otherwise, you would have gone with somebody else.
No, not really. I mean, essentially, the vast majority of all transactions that take place between human beings are always free, voluntary transactions.
No, certainly. How did you find this guy?
I know somebody who knows him, and they recommended him, and I called him, and he came, and we agreed on a price, and he came and he did the job, and he left. I mean,
and you paid him in paper money, or how did you pay him?
Cash.
Yeah, so you got a discount on that service by way of the tax.
No. I mean, look, the U.S. has become much more a managed economy where people need licenses for pretty much everything. But most of the world, this isn't the way things work. Most of the world, you need a plumber. In order to become a plumber, you just need to start plumbing, and then you make.
Well, let's talk about the nature. Let's talk about the nature of the water. The water itself is provided by the city. The only reason that plumber was doing that service for you is because you had this benefit to being a citizen. Otherwise, it would have come from I guess a still up in your roof or something like that. And even then, you would have been subject to all kinds of taxes and systems for.
So all of these taxes and systems that you describe are essentially the opposite of what a free market is. However, anything good that basically happens anywhere, it comes out as a result of voluntary interactions between people. And these sort of
anything good
that you
have you ever used
essentially
Xbox?
Basically all parasites
We're on YouTube.
on the transactions, imposing monopolies and trying to stop people from doing those things.
But you're here on YouTube on your computer. You're taking benefits from the public systems that are in place to route information across the world at virtually no cost to you through the regulatory subsidies and efficiencies that were provided by those actors to do so. And that's a good thing. What's wrong with that?
No, the majority of everything that you use was built from essentially voluntary exchanges by private enterprise. This is basically government propaganda, the idea that, if it wasn't for the government, we wouldn't have had roads and we wouldn't have had all of those things. You'd have everything provided because people want to provide it for one another. And in fact, you look all over the world.
Let's use my example. Well, the internet. DARPA was a government institution that was funding a lot of the research and development on this technology.
So?
So is that propaganda? Is there a conspiracy there? Or is that, in fact, the result of regulatory subsidies and regulatory environments facilitating this network?
No,
I'm pretty sure it's the latter.
No. Because if you think about it, the telegraph and the telephone and all the technologies that led towards the DARPA and the internet, where the majority of them were developed in the private sector. Now, this isn't to say that the government can't intervene in the market. Of course it can intervene.
But in the
and
case
of course, hang on,
telephone,
listen to me, let me finish.
Okay.
Of course it can intervene, and of course it can monopolize factors of production. It can hire all the smart engineers in a country for a while, and then anything that those engineers produce, people are going to think, oh, well, that the government did that. But that's ridiculous, because those engineers, if they weren't hired by the government, they would have been working something else, and they would have been also producing other things. The point is, everything worthwhile comes from free enterprise. If you'd like to take your argument further, you should go and live in a place like North Korea, where free enterprise doesn't exist, and restrictions and regulations and government provision control virtually everything in the economy.
I just came back from Laos. I was in Laos, communist Laos, a couple weeks ago. What I saw over there was total underdevelopment as a result of having poor regulatory environments, I would add. It's very hard for businesses to set up shop there and receive any protections whatsoever in terms of commerce, law, IP, et cetera, et cetera. You can't resolve disputes through a court. That's what I saw when I was in a communist country recently. Let me ask you.
No.
Let me ask you something.
You've got this the other way around. See, government isn't needed to provide all of those things. Government just needs to get out of the way in order for those things to come good. So the problem with places that are communist is that government doesn't let people do things because there's a lot of regulations and licensing and so on.
There's a very simple problem with your conception of this, which is that if, in fact, there were an efficiency to reduce governance, to any degree that we would see it as an efficiency, as you would advocate it, certainly, we would see that in place. The countries that were able to enact these reduced regulations would in fact be the status quo, and that's not what we see.
No, that is
what we see is that there's a happy medium of regulation.
The countries that are prosperous today are essentially prosperous because they went through many decades and even centuries of largely free market economies that allowed them to develop capital accumulation and to develop economically. So if you think, the British, who were the world leaders in the Industrial Revolution, the key thing that they had probably is the fact that they had overlapping jurisdictions. There was no monopoly on law and justice. And so one of the important things that happened in Britain was that law was provided privately. So you and I would walk up to a court and agree to sign a contract there, and we could choose whichever contract we wanted to sign with whichever court we wanted to sign, and that court had the right to enforce that contract. And these courts were competitive, so it was a market in law and order. And that's part of the reason that the British developed an excellent legal protection system, and that's why they've developed so well. And if you look, if you compare across the world, you look at the European countries, and you look at the extent of individual liberty that was there throughout the 19th century, for instance, and you compare it to the rest of the world, there was no question that the Europeans were far more liberated, and the government or authority, third-party authority, had far less of an influence over individuals than in many other places. And that is a big part of why these countries were the most advanced for a very long period of time. And, if you look at the 20th century, I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like, you just look at the...
We lost him. We lost him. Hey, Saifedean. Saifedean, we're losing you. We lost you. We lost you midstream there. Come on. I can't hear you over here. Hold on. You've been on. Thank you, Victor, for your tips over there. Much appreciated. Saifedean, I don't know if you can hear me. I cannot hear you. Come in, Saifedean. You're in outer space. You're in a science-free zone. Get back to us. We want to rein you in.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. But it sounds like you're in a fucking wind tunnel or something. Jesus Christ, man. Where are you? Saifedean. I know it's not on my end because I'm watching the Exotica here. I got a whole fucking system now. I'm telling you guys, like this is a fucking grade A studio I built out here in my living room with my cats. But I can see that the video's over here. So what is this guest 245975? What is no evidence of this? I mean, I don't doubt I mean, I was going to walk him through why his claims are extraordinary, but I think we've lost him. So, let me see. We lost you, bro. We lost you. All right, there we go.
Okay.
So hold on. This is going to be a very difficult interview if you've got iffy internet. Tell me a little bit about what your internet is here real quick before we get back into that.
Well, the internet is a state monopoly here in Lebanon, so this is why it's pretty shitty. So I rest my case.
Here, hold on one second. Let me try. What's the segue? I'm gonna try. I don't know how much of this is going to be salvageable. We may or may not air this depending on how bad your internet is. Okay, he landed. He's back. We got him back. All right, Saifedean.
Yep.
Let's continue where we left off. You know, we were talking for a little bit there. We got disconnected. Let me rein it back in. Do countries compete?
Yes.
Okay. So does it not stand to reason that in this world of countries competing, that the countries with the best governance would in fact be what the quote unquote libertarians would have you believe the market decided?
Well, not exactly, because it's not exactly like it's free competition, and movement isn't free. So if you had free movement of people, then people would move around much more easily. Unfortunately, with national borders and countries requiring passports and so on, you can be a pretty shitty government and still keep your population under you. So there are millions of people who live under horrible governments who'd love to leave. However, in the larger
there's plenty of governments. There's plenty of governments that'll allow for immigration. Hold on. I got to fact check you.
Govern the least. So if you look all around the world, the countries that govern the least are the ones that do the best. So
that's rhetoric. That's libertarian canon. Let's just look at for a second here. Which countries have open immigration policies? Because I know that like Haiti, super easy to immigrate to, no problem. You go in Haiti anytime.
That's not the point. I'm not saying. This is a different discussion. I'm not calling for open immigration. I'm just saying you would have
because you said
competition between countries if people could move freely, but we don't. So therefore, you can be a crappy government and still continue to keep your population. That's the point.
But I gave you an example of a country that does allow for immigration freely.
Okay.
I'm sure there's many others. So why aren't those countries doing well if that's the efficiency?
Because that's not what I said. What I said was that this wasn't my argument. You've missed my point again. I'm not going to repeat it again because that would be pointless. The point is this. You look around the world and you see which countries are doing best, and you see that they're the ones always that have the least government. So you look all over Latin America, which has been the most prosperous and peaceful country in Latin America over the last 40 years or so.
Country?
Chile.
Give me a name. Which country?
Chile.
So I would have thought like United States is, doing the best, or maybe China is doing the best, or Japan. These are countries with very high populations, per capita GDPs, and high.
Yes,
GDPs.
But I was looking at Latin America. Look at Europe, for instance.
Chile?
Which is the most prosperous and peaceful country in Europe? Switzerland. That virtually has no central government. Why? Because people are free to do whatever the hell they want to do in Switzerland.
Switzerland is a fine country. What metric are you going by, though?
Well, who's the president of Switzerland?
I have no idea.
Exactly. Swiss people have no idea who the president is. The president of Switzerland doesn't do jack shit. There's effectively no president in Switzerland. The people are basically free. You do whatever you want. There's low taxes. The government doesn't intervene.
So hold on. This is very circular. Your metric of why Switzerland is a prosperous country is the fact that nobody knows its president? Therefore, it's prosperous?
Because the government doesn't do shit. The government is completely inconsequential to the life of its citizens. Everybody in North Korea knows who the president is. And look how well that works out. Because whatever you want to do in North Korea, the president has to decide.
Let's look at the per capita GDP of European countries. This would be a little bit more scientific, okay? If I'm looking here at the Wikipedia list, if I look at the nominal per capita GDP, Switzerland is number 2, so that would be a good reason. The Luxembourg is a little bit higher still, which is for fairly obvious reasons. Does Luxembourg have a president? Might be one question we could ask. I have no fucking clue.
Luxembourg is a monarchy. They have a prince. They're a principality. They have a prince, and basically, again, it's also a very free market. So you look at all across Europe. Generally, the most interventionist governments are the ones that are doing the worst all over. You look, pick any region in the world where you can compare similar countries, and you can see this pattern over and over and over again. So, for instance, around here where I am, in the Middle East, you compare, for instance, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt, even before the recent events and so on. Which one of these countries has been doing much better? Jordan, by far. Why? Because it has the least interventionist government. The other countries have very, very interventionist governments that control the economy. They're leftover socialist regimes. So the more central planning you have in an economy, the more control of an economy. You look at the Soviet Union, you look at West Germany versus East Germany, you look at North Korea versus South Korea. The examples are endless. We could go on forever. And if you don't know this, it's a problem. And it's a problem that we have to waste half an hour to establish what free markets are when we haven't even gotten to the point of money and sound money, which was what we wanted to discuss today.
There's no such thing as a free market. You're not going to be able to find an example. The entire markets exist because of government regulation.
No.
How about this? How do you have ownership without government?
No,
how about that?
This is
Simple.
ridiculous.
How do you have ownership without government? Explain that one to me.
Oh my goodness.
Let's use an island.
Yep.
You and I are on an island. You've got a hot chick and some coconuts. Yep. You say it's yours. I say it's mine. So I plan to slit your throat in the night, and I take your girl and I take your coconuts.
Okay.
That'll exist for as long as the next guy does it to me.
Exactly. And then
without some rule of law,
nope.
That's what's going to happen. So how do you prevent that?
That creates possibility of human society is not government, and it is absolutely ridiculous and astonishing every time I hear somebody who's ignorant enough to believe this garbage that was taught to you in public school. What creates the possibility of
I didn't go to public school. I didn't even go to school. So it could just be that I'm uneducated, but you can't blame it on public school.
Somewhere along the line you were miseducated. That's clear. But anyways.
Yeah. No. I used to think what you believe. To be clear, and you can find stuff like that online, even I'm sure. And I changed my mind after having thought about it and removing my ideology. Go back to the example.
Okay,
what do you propose
let me answer your question first.
About your girl and your
I'm going to get to your question. What creates the possibility of civilization, what creates the possibility of human society coexisting, of people being able to live together in peace, is natural law. And natural law is something that every individual, every society, every civilization that has ever existed has a concept of. And in natural law, there is such a thing as legitimate property. Legitimate property is everything that you own because you built yourself from things that other people don't claim, or things that you got from other people willingly. So, I have the coconuts because I climbed onto the tree and I got the coconuts, or I got the coconuts from you because I gave you something else instead of the coconut. What happens in a human society is that people have a choice. They can choose to cooperate or they can choose to try coercion. So if people choose to live in a civilized manner like human beings, we accept the notion of cooperation. We accept the notion of natural law. I'm not a human being. Hang on.
I would take your girl. I really don't care.
We accept the notion of natural law. We accept the legitimate property. And we accept that, if you got the coconuts from the tree, then they're yours. And then I can't just come and take them from you. And what happens is that in a large society, if you assault me or I assault you, everybody in the society will reject you for assaulting me and might...
No, they won't. I've got my dudes. Like you have not spent time in Miami. There's a group of guys that you hang out with, and you guys are a gang.
There will always be animals, and there will always be bears, and there will always be monkeys, and there will always be monkeys slinging shit at each other, and there will always be uncivilized human beings who resort to violence in order to take things instead of working from them. However, if you'd like to live in a place that is civilized, if you want to get away from your shit, and if you want to stop slinging your shit at others and having shit slung at you all day, you accept natural order of things, and you accept legitimate property, and you accept to live according to these ideas. Now, you don't have to accept those things, and you can continue to live like that, and that's perfectly fine. Eventually, you live by that, you're going to die by that. One day, you're going to take coconuts from a guy who's going to have more dudes than you, and he's going to kill you, and that'll be the end of you, and it'll be a beautiful day when we're gotten rid of the monkey that steals our coconuts. However, there are a lot of people who want to live in civilized societies. There are a lot of people who want to cooperate, and those people will end up establishing human societies, and they will build them on the notion of cooperation, on the notion of on consent, on respect, and on trading rather than stealing from one another. So you're totally...
You say
there's no right and wrong.
This has been 10,000 years we've been waiting for this, right, or more. We've been waiting for this proposed model for 10,000 years.
What do you mean we're waiting for this? This is the only reason that you're not eating in your own shit. The only reason that you're living a civilized life is because human beings cooperate. It's not because of violence, and it's not because of thieves, and it's not because of that. It's absolutely ridiculous that you think that your model of you just assaulting people is how anything ever gets done or anything gets built. And the fact that you live in the US.
That's what happens in communist
Laos. In the US,
I was just there.
Why
there's no regulation
live in a place where there's a war, where you can get to live like that, where you can get to use your violence and take coconuts and take women from other people. There's a reason you choose to live in a place that is more civilized, where this stuff doesn't happen. When was the last time you committed a crime? I don't think you've.
Oh God, I do it every day. I smoke weed and I do heroin and
just a stupid government
probably do
law.
much worse.
It's not a crime. That's a stupid government law. A crime is when
it's a crime. But here's the thing: you libertarians have this like empathy model. Like it's the Care Bear stare that keeps your society together. I'm going to take my band of thieves and I will rob you. I will take all your nice shit.
No, because
and
you know
I will
what
do that for as long as I get away with it.
The civilized people. This is the history of all human society. The civilized people who cooperate and respect one another are able to develop a force that is far stronger than the monkeys that are jumping at each other and slitting each other's throats, because human beings can organize. Human beings did not rule all the other animals because we're bigger or because we're stronger, but because we're smarter and because we can think further. And so the human beings will always defeat the monkeys and the animals like you, basically, who want to always continue to assault others. It doesn't matter how much you think that you can do this, but the people who will coordinate with one another, who will organize, who will live respecting each other's borders and respecting each other's property, these people will be able to hire a much stronger band of thugs that will kick your ass if you ever assault them. That's how civilization emerges. We build force defensively to prevent animals from attacking us, and that's how all human societies have ever flourished and prospered. And it's not because of people attacking each other. It's because of people defending themselves, and that's always what happens. The defensive force is always stronger because defense is legitimate, and attack is always attacking off its own legitimate territory, and so it's always at a disadvantage. And because the people who are defensive, the people who don't want to assault others, are always capable of building better weapons. They're always capable of organizing better. This is why we hunt lions and lions don't hunt us. And this is why it doesn't matter how much stronger or bigger or taller than me you are. If I live legitimately, I can hire people to kick your ass, no problem.
You do. You're required to hire those people, in fact, because not everybody can afford to. So if you put a law in place that we normalize that expense across all citizens, that becomes a cheap expense.
This is essentially, so the way that civilization happens is that the people who respect natural law and who respect property get together and set up a defensive force. The way that civilization falls apart is when that defensive force turns against the people that are under its mark. After a few generations of those people taking it for granted, and a few generations of those people devolving intellectually, you get to a point where people believe the garbage that you believe, which is that, we wouldn't have coconuts if it wasn't for this defensive person. And then that person starts essentially exploiting the people that he's supposed to be defending. And usually, they do this with setting up a flag and a song and all of these trappings of retarded nationalism and so on, and then people start believing that we need this protection in order for us to stay alive. Once that happens,
let me interrupt this. Hold on. Let me interrupt this.
Model, and that model is how civilization falls apart. But then that falls apart, and then a new band of people come along and produce this. So you didn't invent anything new when you realized that somebody could attack somebody and take a coconut from them. You've just figured out how civilization falls apart. But that's not very hard.
Let me interrupt you. Come on, hold on.
Do this. The hard part is being able to build a civilization.
Hold on. We're going to move on. We're making this lightning. Here's the thing. Let me ask you something else. Mm-hmm. If you have two competing, we agree at least that countries compete. If we have two competing countries, and one country has a military and the other country doesn't, do you believe that the one with the military stands a better chance at receiving natural resources between the boundaries and in the oceans and such?
Yes.
Do you believe that if people are forced to pay for military, that there would be greater funding for military than if it was compulsory military spending?
No, because if the military was for people's own good, people would pay for it voluntarily. So if you look at the 19th century,
that's the tragedy of the commons. Like people will not; they will just assume.
No, I mean,
if that were the case, my YouTube channel would be making tons of money because the people who are watching this right now will all be Patreon supporters, willingly throwing money at it, rather than I'm not even on Patreon. But my
the
presumption
point is
that
that they're not paying for it, then
free.
they don't feel that it is worth paying for it, and that's perfectly fine. You're not paying me, so that's totally fine. It would be wrong if they were paying you. The point is, people are free to pay whatever they want, and the reality is,
so why don't you spend money? Why don't you spend more money on your military? Because I bet you don't. Do you donate money to your military? And who has ever donated money to their country's military?
Well, the majority of militaries, essentially, if you think about it, how things used to function before the era of democracy, the military was the private army of a king. And, the people, it was very hard for the military to maintain, before fiat money, and this is a lead up that's going to get us to the topic that we should discuss today. Before fiat money, when we had sound money, the only way that a military could subsist and continue to stay organized and in place and able to defend its people was if it took taxes. And so then they couldn't print money, so they had to take taxes, and taxes are much harder to take from people than inflation, because with inflation you can easily just print money and take money from people, but with taxes.
You're not answering the question. Hold on, Saifedean. If a compulsory military were more efficient, why is it that we have militaries by which taxes are funding that service?
What?
If military spending were more efficient in a donation model, why is it that no country on earth has such a system?
Because the thing is, this is not a free market competitive system. There will always be monkeys, and there will
Who's
always...
the conspiracy? But who's the one? Who's the one with this conspiracy keeping people from donating to their militaries?
Seriously, you're looking at a model where you have the monkeys attacking people, and you're telling me, see, monkeys succeeded in attacking people in this point, and therefore we should all become like monkeys and start slinging shit at each other. Well, look at the world that we have with compulsory military spending that came about after the abandonment of the gold standard in 1914. How did this world look? Tens of millions of people were slaughtered all over the world, and conflict continues all the time, and wars are fought all the time over nothing. How does this world compare to...
Not over nothing. You know that's not over nothing. If it was over nothing, it wouldn't be happening. You can't say that the evidence doesn't exist. You have to acknowledge that it's there.
No, you missed the point. The fact that something exists doesn't mean that you have to choose it. It's a completely wrong-headed way of looking at things. Look, there will always be monkeys slinging shit. That doesn't mean you and I need to become monkeys that sling shit at each other. And this is a very, very complicated point, it seems, for you to grasp. But, you make a choice.
No, it's not, because you're throwing actual evidence out the window. Here is a world where this thing happened, and you're saying it didn't.
No, I'm not saying
or that it's nonsense.
I'm saying there was another world in which this didn't happen, and the world was better. A better world is possible. You look at the world in the 19th century. There was more peace, there was more cooperation across the world, and there was less war, and there was less destruction in the 20th century. So it's a choice. You have the choice.
Americans spend roughly 50% of their taxes on military spending.
Well, Americans don't really spend any of their taxes. Your government doesn't need your stupid money for taxes. The government prints its own money. It only uses your taxes.
I pay my taxes. I pay my tataxes. I like paying my taxes. I recommend everybody else pay their taxes. But that aside, 50% of that money... You should donate
more. Why do you just pay only your taxes?
I spend significant...
Donate more.
I don't want to donate more. What I want to do is spread out that cost evenly so that I don't have to pay it. If it's a systemic cost, then it's baked into the price of all goods and services. So I don't want to take on unilateral exposure to that risk. I want the society as a whole to bear that. That way I can compete at a fair level without incurring any sort of penalty for doing what is effectively like a social good.
There is no social good. It's
it just doesn't benefit me past
all
the
of this stuff. If you made taxation voluntary, nobody who doesn't pay taxes would lose out on anything. You could have privately provided roads, and you think the U.S. foreign policy protects you when you're in the U.S. It's completely ridiculous. The notion that people all over the world are
roads are natural monopolies. You can't do anything about that. You cannot do anything about the straightest line between two paths. That is a natural monopoly. And then on top of that, the government owns all land anyways. You don't have to go through
the straightest line. There are millions of other lines. It's not a natural monopoly.
Sure, but that's going to be the most efficient route.
Roads were being built in the U.S. for years before before taxes were being built. People will always build roads. You have streets, and then you have roads, and private providers will provide streets, and other people will provide roads, and that's fine. The private providers will provide the roads, and streets will just emerge as common areas within towns, and people will live in them. And then, there will be the people who actually live around the street decide what happens with it. It's completely ridiculous. Ridiculous, the notion that you need taxation for any of that bullshit. And it's just brainwashing. And in any case, you don't even need taxation in the case of the U.S. because the government prints the money. So it doesn't need your stupid money. It just keeps that money to keep you using their currency. The government just
we haven't even gotten into money yet. We haven't even gotten into the money yet. All right, I tell you what, we're going to fast forward past all of the issues of ownership. We've aired out parts of our sides. In fact, guys that are watching this, why don't you put your comments down below and weigh in? Let's fast forward right to money. Here's what I would suggest. Here's what I believe. In times of crisis, citizens store their value in the credit of the world's largest navy. You would rather see that be gold, or you think that that's not true?
The reality is the vast majority of human history, people store their money in the free market money. And in fact, what the money of the government was only ever became money because it was gold. No government ever came up with money out of thin air and just printed pieces of paper and told people that's money. It was always gold, and it was always paper backed by gold. And that's how you get money. So you can't impose a money on people.
What happens when we have more wealth in this world than we have gold to express it?
The price of gold goes up. That's it. Why do you need any specific quantity? That's exactly as ridiculous as saying there's not enough Bitcoin.
No, because you
only have 21 million. It doesn't matter.
Because the distribution of gold is throughout society's weirder components. You can't systematically unfree that. What ends up happening is that the gold bugs make money, which is I'm sure why you like this at some level. But you don't have any system to articulate value in any real capacity independent of the market for gold.
You don't have a system to articulate value because you don't understand economics. Gold is the way in which value is articulated, and the point and the reason is this: gold is sound.
What backs gold? What backs gold? What backs gold? Why not
gold
tungsten?
Is the chemistry of gold, the fact that it has the lowest inflation supply rate. This is the key property of gold people don't get. It's not that it's yellow,
of commodities to choose from. I'm sure that I will find a commodity, if not off the top of my head, that has better properties than gold in all of those capacities.
No, not in the one property that matters. Now listen, this is a complex thought, so you're going to have to let me finish.
The inflationary supply of gold, there's plenty of materials out there that have commodities that have significantly more reduced supplies, significantly more stable supplies.
Wrong. Listen.
The easy answer is because you have to admit this. It has historical value, and there's a cultural consideration.
Listen, here's the thing you need to understand about gold.
I don't know if I need to.
Well, you were the one who wanted to talk to me about it. So if you go to this is really the punchline behind the whole discussion. And I'll leave you with this to think about it, because it really is what it comes down to. It's the majority of gold bugs don't get this, and the majority of gold bugs will tell you it's history and all that. It's bullshit. It's one metric. That's what matters, and it's one metric, and nothing in the world could ever compete with gold on this one metric, except for one thing that we have right now, which is Bitcoin. And that's why lots of gold bugs and Bitcoins like each other, or have similar interests at least. So this is the point.
I love Bitcoin, okay? But Bitcoin only exists because the government subsidizes its existence. That's the only reason it exists.
Here's the thing. The point is this. Gold cannot be destroyed, okay? It's essentially indestructible. So the gold that existed 5,000 years ago, that was held by people 5,000 years ago, the gold that Nefertiti wore 5,000 years ago, might be, today it's in a coin that you might be owning somewhere in Florida today. All the gold that has ever been mined, more or less, is still around somewhere today, sitting there looking pretty, just being gold, okay? That's one property. It's indestructible. The second property is that it is impossible to synthesize. You can't just make gold industrially out of other things. If you want gold, you have to dig for it and look for it and refine it, and it's an extremely complicated and expensive and toxic and horrible process to go through. It's not an easy way to do it. What does this mean? It means that the annual production of gold that you get from mines all over the world is always roughly around 1 to 2% of the global stockpiles of gold. And this is not true for anything else in the world. Why? Because we have 6,000 years of gold production accumulating in people's holdings all over the world, okay? Thousands of years, from the pharaohs to the ancient Greeks to the ancient Romans to everybody who's ever used any form of money in the last 5,000 years ago. Well, maybe not everybody, but the majority of money over the last 5,000 years ago, and jewelry was gold. So all these people were producing gold, accumulating it, and all of that gold didn't go anywhere. It didn't rust. It didn't decay. It didn't evaporate. It's just sitting there looking pretty, still being gold. So therefore, annual production this year.
That's true of water.
No, it's not. Hang on. Annual production this year, if we are going to produce more gold, if let's say the price of gold spikes from $1,200 an ounce to $10,000 an ounce tomorrow, gold miners are obviously going to go crazy and they're going to invest so much more in mining. How much more gold can they make? Let's say they double their output. How much is that going to mean? That means that the supply of gold is going to increase from, it's going to increase by 3% or something like that, right?
There are major problems with this. How does the Hunt brothers cornering the silver market, or even the United States manipulating the gold market, if you believe in manipulation, which I don't, but controlling the gold market, weigh into this factor? Because it's not as simple as production. Inflation and deflation happens for all kinds of reasons.
This is the era of central banking. Now we're talking about the history of gold, so we'll get to that in a minute. But I want you to understand why gold maintained its monetary role throughout hundreds and thousands of years. Because fundamentally, it won the free market. And for me, remember, the first point that I tried to make was, for me, the important thing is that you want to have money that is free market money. And so gold was free money.
Why? That's the first principle. That's a religious value.
We went over this. It doesn't matter. I don't care
science.
if you disagree. I got to move on with my life. The point is, in a free market, gold is going to be chosen as money because it has the lowest inflation rate. And that is just always going to be predictably low because nobody can do anything about it. Because nobody could ever produce 10% of the global stockpile of gold this year. You look at the U.S. Geological Survey data on the production of gold over the last 100 years or so. Basically,
how do you know gold has the lowest inflation rate?
Every year, the supply goes up by about 1.5%. Sometimes it's 1.7, sometimes it's 1.3. With all of the changes in the gold standard and in the changes in the money supply and in all of those things, gold only goes, and in the price of gold only goes up by about 1.5 to 1.7% or something like that. So what does that mean?
Gold, if you look at the gold charts, the inflation rate of gold is just crazy. I mean, look at the gold price over the last 20 years or so. You see it inflating and deflating constantly. Here, let me look it up. Hold on, I'm going to bring this up
right now. You're talking about the price or the supply?
The price of goods and services as measured in the unit price of gold. I'm going to put up a random chart here. I don't know if this is the best. It's the 10-year gold price from 2008 until today. Let me just show this here if I can.
Basically doubled since 2008.
Fine. Okay, fine. So then you don't even dispute it. But then that being the case, how can you claim that there's a stable inflation rate?
That's not the point. The point is gold is no longer...
I'm showing this chart right now to the guests. No. And if I look at this, the rate is in flux very, very, drastically on any given year. So like your thesis falls apart very quickly if I just look at the price data for gold.
Why? Hang on. How does it fall apart?
I'm looking at it. I can show it to you. The reason it falls apart is because it's a market.
This is my point. I didn't say that the price of gold was going to be stable because you're measuring the price of gold in the U.S. dollar, and that's not stable.
You just said that inflation
is no longer the money of the world today. People don't use gold as money today primarily. They use paper currencies, and this is the exact problem.
Well, I agree.
You're assuming that this means that the price of gold has to remain stable for something, but that would be completely ridiculous. It's completely meaningless. I didn't make that claim. You made it. I'm saying the supply.
No, you just said that the inflation rate was you said the inflation rate was stable, and I just showed you a big chart. I showed the audience a chart, which was the opposite of stable. Should we look at the inflation rate for the U.S. dollar?
I said the supply, not the price. You're the one making this about the price. I said the supply. Can you understand the difference? The quantity of gold that exists around the world increases by around 1.5% every year. That's what I'm talking about. In a free market.
But that's not inflation. I think we found the problem. That's not inflation. The problem is that the inflation is the general level of consumer prices, not the issuance rate.
That's a wrong way of defining inflation. The correct definition
that's not the wrong way. That's the economic
is the supply increase. The price rise is the symptom of that increase. It's a big misunderstanding that modern economists have. Inflation, the traditional way that the term is understood.
Are we ignoring the consumer price index the way we ignore wars? I mean, this logic requires ideological blindness that is very significant. There's very concrete data for these opinions, and when I bring it up, you tell me to throw it out the window.
I'm not bringing it up. You're the one bringing it up and assuming that this is my argument. I didn't say anything about the price level in gold. If you look at it in the long run, this is the key thing. Look at the price of a house today in dollars versus the price of a house in 1950 in dollars. It's gone up massively. Look at it in terms of gold. It's remained roughly the same. It's not the same, obviously. It'll go up and it'll go down. It's meaningless to have a stable unit of stable monetary unit. The whole point of money is that it measures value. And so, of course, it's going to go up and down a lot. But when you look at the fluctuation in prices, you're looking at the fluctuation in the value of the dollar, not in the value of gold, because in the long run, a price of a cow has more or less always been around 1 ounce of gold, pretty much all throughout history.
All right. We're going to wrap up this interview. I appreciate your hard work thus far. I'm very dense. I know that I'm not well educated, and I require very slow explanations, but you've done a good job thus far. I'm not convinced, of course, but you've done a good job explaining your point. Last point, I want to wrap it up on this. If gold were, in fact, an efficient currency, how come no successful country on Earth has used it as a currency?
What the fuck? This is an unbelievably retarded question for you to ask. You look at the world...
That's a good place to end it. I'm okay with that. That's a good place to end it. Saifedean, where can people find out more about you?
Twitter mainly. Twitter at Saifedean. But basically just read about the gold standard, the most prosperous era in the history of the world. Read about the golden era of the West between 1870 and 1914. That happened because the majority of the world was on the gold standard and everybody could trade using the same unit. And since then, the world has gone to shit because everybody has developed their own monetary unit, and they're all constantly devalued, and they're all constantly fighting currency wars against each other, and it's just it's an unbelievable question for you to ask. Let me just put it down.
You go back to your corner of the ring. I'm gonna go back to my corner of the ring. Audience, you guys just saw this. Why don't you weigh in below? Who's the bigger idiot? I'm sure it's me, but by how much? Tell us below. Weigh in. I look forward to reading those comments. And hey, guys, if you liked this, subscribe to the channel. Helps me out a lot. I really appreciate that. Reach out to me on Twitter at DeRoseTech. And if you want to talk about Bitcoin all day, every day, reach out to me on Telegram at Brighton36. Oh, my God. My brain exploded. Too much information. Peace out, party people.
All right. Take care.